Welcome back to Five on the Floor. I'm your host, Greg Sylvander. Tonight's floor plan, no Ethan Skolnick. Again, he gets a night off. It feels like he's getting lots of nights off recently. I don't know what's up with that, but he
Load
deserves it.
management.
He's the hardest working man in Miami sports show business right now, I would say, with the network and everything going on. But with me this evening, we have Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket on Twitter. And we also are joined by our uh, post-game stream extraordinaire host, Royal A. Shepherd, as you can follow him on Twitter, with us for the standing in for Ethan tonight. Welcome for joining. Thank you for joining us.
No problem, dude.
Anyway, so this is a bit of a weird moment, I would say, like when you talk about the schedule and when you're about to embark on a um, on a long West Coast string, and the Heat have some climbing to do in the standings. It was a bit of a weird, slow news day. So I kind of want to slow down and get away from the action a little bit and talk about some news that popped up on the timeline today. And we're going to address it. There's a couple things I wanted to clarify that I've heard after I checked in on a few things, and kind of go from here. So the first thing is this. There was an article by a gentleman by the name of Jake Fisher, who is, let's see here, most recently, or he writes for Bleacher Report, and is an author, seemingly, has done stuff for Sports Illustrated. So to my knowledge, I don't know the gentleman, but he appears to be a reputable source. He wrote an article on Kyle Lowry and about that this could be the final games of Kyle Lowry in Toronto, and the fascinating wrinkle, he calls it, of this year's trade deadline. That sparked a little bit of buzz on Heat Twitter specifically today, because the Miami Heat were mentioned in the article as a viable option for Kyle Lowry to be traded to Miami. But also, we know that Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry have a long-standing relationship. That's Jimmy's dude. We got people very close to Jimmy that have told us outright that if he could play with anybody around the league, Kyle Lowry is about at the top of the list. So I think that there is dot connection there that isn't unwarranted. So I'm going to start here. Do you guys think, are you buying Kyle Lowry? I guess I'll start with you, Alex. Are you buying Kyle Lowry as an option for Miami? And we've talked a lot about this before, so I'm kind of readdressing it in the context of, would you give up Tyler Hero or Duncan Robinson to get him?
Man, if you're just gonna frame it like that, that is really tough, man. How old is Kyle Lowry now? 35? Do I have that right? 34? Correct. I think he's the same age as Dragic. But I think it's really tough to trade one of those guys for a 35-year-old Lowry. Even then, I would really, really, really consider it, and especially knowing that it probably won't be just a straight up 1-for-1 trade. I think it'd be a little bit tough to pull the trigger on that. I was thinking of it in terms of, maybe you get the price to be like a pick and Precious and some filler, I don't know, something like that, where maybe you don't have to trade one of those two guys and you could still strengthen the core, adding a win now piece like him. But I think it's definitely a relevant option. I think it's just as far as, what does Toronto want to return, and like, does Lowry actually want to be traded, right? And I think it's I look at it from that end, and also from the end that, like, he's going to be a free agent, right? So at some point, like, if they're not sure about his commitment to Toronto, the best move would be to trade him now, because they're not going to trade any of their other pieces, and it would just make a lot of sense to get something in return and letting him walk.
So something that with Kyle Lowry, this is what's been tugging at me about this deal. Usually I'm all in on like the next let's trade for an all-star conversation. And like, I am the star hunter. That's my deal, because I follow what Riley, the blueprint is what I'm about, right? But this Kyle Lowry thing has thrown me for a loop, because when we talked about it in past seasons, it was always under the context of them trading Goran Dragic in exchange for Kyle Lowry. And now it appears as if that's not really likely. I don't know. I just don't feel like Jimmy is going to sign off on a Goran deal. I feel like the organization and Goran are working together. That just seems pretty evident. He doesn't want to go anywhere. I mean, I guess if there's anyone that they were going to trade Goran for, maybe it's Kyle Lowry, who's Jimmy's homie. Royal. do you think that Miami would consider putting Goran in a deal for Kyle Lowry, even the heartache that comes with it, if it allowed them to keep Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero?
I think there's no way in hell they include Goran Dragic in any trade. The Kyle Lowry thing is interesting, but even back to the question that you asked Alex, I don't think they put Duncan or Tyler in that trade. Like I just don't. At this point, it's like if you're not trading for a star, then you don't trade those guys for anything. Especially a depreciating asset like Lowry. He's nice to have, but at this point, I don't even feel like Lowry would move the needle that much for this team. Like I feel like he's an improvement, he's an upgrade in certain respects, but I don't think he puts us over the top. So I wouldn't, gut the morale or one of the emotional leaders of the team for a Kyle Lowry. So no, I wouldn't trade Dragic or Tyler or Duncan for
that. You know what, that's really interesting that you say that. I think that you would find the Heat fan base is far more divided on that conversation than maybe the three of us are. And I don't know, Alex, I'll let you jump in a moment, but I agree with you. Like there's a part of me that feels like Kyle Lowry isn't the quote unquote whale that makes you cash in all the chips. And he also is not worth it to me to do Goran Dragic in bad faith. But I don't think that the latter of those two is really the concern. It's more about the first option. And it's like, what is your ceiling if you get Kyle Lowry, but you have to sacrifice Duncan Robinson to do it? And I think that there's some definite things that he would help with. And he plugs a lot of holes, especially defensively and getting the team organized, cutting down turnovers, hitting threes. I mean, I think he's shooting 8 attempts, shooting pretty well. Alex, like where do you stand with this Lowry thing? Like, do you think it is, I don't think you're going to go to the place of that you think Goran is going to be included in a deal, but are you in that same spot Royals at where you don't think he doesn't elevate them enough to empty out any of these chips?
Well, that, but also even more than that, I just don't see why Goran is the piece to go out in the deal. Like I understand the Raptors still want to compete and all that. Goran is still a good player, but to me, it would just seem to make more sense to, get back some younger guys to kind of throw into your rebuild there, and not a rebuild, but to your like contenders
retooling.
need to have young cores, and the Raptors are just as good as anybody at developing young guys. So if he can give them like KZ and Precious, I'm not saying I'm already good with, giving up multiple young guys like that, but like I could see that being something that appeals to the Raptors more than Goran, who is also going to be a free agent and like who is clearly kind of starting to decline a little bit. And yeah, Goran is still a good player for sure, but you throw in the angle that he's just so close to Jimmy and he's Jimmy's guy, and it would be kind of cold if the Heat traded him. I think it would be.
Yeah,
and it wouldn't match with everything they said.
Doesn't it kind of feel like a lateral move for them to get Goran? Either like if you're going to trade for Goran Dragic, you might as well keep Lowry, right? Like
no, yeah, trading for
yeah,
Goran.
well, especially because you don't upset the fan base.
yeah,
part
you don't
of it is that
so you can play defense still.
Right, exactly. It's like I have a hard time knowing what Toronto's long-term plan is. Like with Masai, kind of like I've been reading stories recently about teams like anteing up to go and get him, and I wonder if Toronto do they have the guts to go full reset when he is potentially able to go elsewhere, or do they want to stay in contention? And does a player like Dragic actually extend the window if he picked up his team option and they had an extra year with Dragic? Maybe not. I kind of see your point that Dragic is really not the player that makes the most sense there. So I'm leaning in your direction there. And then, there's also a conversation of how you make those pieces fit depending on who you send out with Hero, Nunn, Dragic, and Lowry and all that. I'm going to pivot a little bit here to a deal that just happened, and it happened with a team that the Miami Heat are currently in a 2-game set with, and that's Derrick Rose ended up in New York for the second time. And it was reported by somebody who I cannot recall off the top of my head, but it was somebody credible, if I remember correctly. And I hate that I can't credit the person. I think it was Vincent Goodwill.
I think it's Vinny Goodwill.
So yeah, and Vinny's a friend of the program. He's as legit as they come. Said Miami was one of the teams that was interested in Derrick Rose. That had me raise an eyebrow because when you think about the guard needs and the fact that they're in on a Derrick Rose type, now we hear these Kyle Lowry whispers. What do you guys think this means? Like, I've kind of felt like they're kind of a little crowded at the guard spot. Yeah, they missed like the pure point guard, but these guys, not all of them are necessarily fitting that bill. What does it tell you, Roy? I'll go to you here. About kind of what their feeling is on the backcourt that you're hearing names like Lowry and Rose as viable trade options.
It sounds like they don't trust it. Like outside of Goran, Kendrick Nunn has been playing well as of late, but it seems like they don't believe that that's sustainable. I don't want to speak for the organization here, but I mean, we would think that they would be looking in the market for a power forward.
Exactly.
And yet the only thing that we were hearing them connected to are point guards. So maybe they view the guard or the defense at the guard position as a more important need than rebounding. But I mean, it is very interesting, like you said, that they would even look into a Derrick Rose type player because he doesn't strike me as a defensive stopper or anything like that. He's kind of like an older version of Kendrick Nunn at this point.
I was going to say decorated Kendrick Nunn.
Yeah. He's MVP Kendrick Nunn. So it's like well, I don't understand the move, but I mean, they got guys smarter than me getting paid to do this.
Is it a smokescreen, Alex? Is that what that is? Miami's name's just getting thrown in there, even though it's BS?
I don't know if it's a smokescreen. That didn't come to my head, but that's kind of interesting. I mean, I don't know. The Heat worked in funny ways, so maybe. But them looking at guards is interesting. Like I'm sure that has to be connected to the Dragic stuff. It has to be connected to kind of wanting somebody else who can take the pressure off of always needing Jimmy and Goran to kind of initiate and attack the rim and do things like that. So the Derrick thing is weird because, like Royal said, like they need to be adding two-way guys, and Derrick is definitely not that type of guy. He's a better version of Kendrick Nunn, and Kendrick has been playing good too. So I'm not trying to trash him or anything like that. But Derrick is just they have similar skill sets in what they do. Like they're scoring guards who can come in and off the bench score. And Derrick's been kind of like a starter level player more than Kendrick is, but I just don't know that that's what they need. And as far as whether they go for guards or forwards, it seems like they were going for forwards more in the offseason. And, Adam was kind of hinting at that there was a player that they thought they had locked down and who ended up, signing with another team who was a forward there. They tried to get Mo Harkless as that guy. It obviously didn't work out. So, maybe they're looking at it like Heat fans do and be like, look, they could use some help at guard and forward. And so that would be nice too if they weren't just having their sights focused on one type of position. I obviously don't have any sources. I wouldn't know anything about that. But like you talk about a team like OKC, and I mentioned this before, unprotected pick, give them something like Kendrick Nunn or KZ Okpala or something like that, one of those guys, and maybe you get back George Hill and Trevor Ariza or something like that. I think you can make that happen. Like I think Lowry would be really nice. I do think he makes the Heat a good amount better. I don't think he's a whale per se, but I think he would be awesome for this team. I just think they have a variety of ways they can go without having to trade Tyler Hero or Duncan Robinson.
My thing is like, what problem does Derrick Rose fix on this roster? Like are you bringing him in to be a starter if you're looking at him? Because
like if you trade Kendrick and something else like KZ, who's not in your rotation, like I guess it's like an upgrade on Kendrick. But
yeah,
but he'd be our starter though. Like even with Goran back, if you want to keep Goran off a bench, then Derrick Rose would be the starter at point guard.
But you can start Goran and bring Derrick off the bench because I think Goran plays really well with the starters, and then Derrick off the bench, that kind of takes some pressure off of Goran. But either way, I'm agreeing with you though. Like I don't see it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
It's a clunky fit at best.
Yeah, no, totally agreed. Also, because he's not particularly a great shooter either. So another interesting wrinkle here is how they approach the rest of this season. And I know we've stayed transaction heavy here, and that's by design. And we're trying to kind of pivot away from the on-court stuff because you're going to get plenty of that throughout the rest of this week on 5 on the Floor. But as we talk about going forward roster construction and how they get the next acquisition that takes them to the next level, Barry Jackson wrote a really insightful piece in the Miami Herald. I encourage everybody to go check it out. You guys know where to find Barry Jackson's work. He's best in the business. Really mapped it out and articulated some different ways Miami could acquire that talent, but also some challenges that would come. After the break, I want to get into some of that and ask you guys how you think Miami moves forward based off of some of these implications. Okay, back on 5 on the floor. So Barry Jackson, as I mentioned, wrote a great piece in the Miami Herald recently, kind of charting out Miami's options for roster construction moving forward. And he brought up something that I thought was particularly interesting to think about. And that is this notion of the sign and trade, which I know I have been selling as a bill of goods to Miami Heat fans as a vehicle with which the Heat can acquire a player, so that this whole cap space thing and worrying about how much cap space they have, like, calm the hell down. They can make a transaction anyway. But Barry brought up a really good point today that I think is worth us talking about. And that is that when you sign and trade for a player, you are then subject to the hard cap. And even though you would have a player like Duncan Robinson's cap hold, and I'm getting a little cap nerd on the listeners here, just bear with me. You wouldn't be able to sign him to whatever he would command on the open market, because once you can't go over the hard cap. And I'm not going to read all of the numbers and get into the nitty gritty that way, because I don't think anybody necessarily wants to go down that road. But essentially what this is breaking down to, and I'm going to read a direct quote here from him, is that, but for those wondering whether the Heat could execute a sign and trade for, say, Oladipo or John Collins at close to max money and keep Robinson at big money, it would be impossible from a hard cap standpoint unless the Heat dumps Dragic. So that's the scenario I want to talk about just quickly here. Where do you guys think we stand with the Heat's sense of urgency? Alex, I'll start with you. Sense of urgency in getting a deal done now to avoid this issue where the hard cap provides constraints from them keeping some of these guys that they need to round out the rest of the roster.
So Barry Jackson's article, which, reiterate everything you said, was great and very, very informative, and kind of goes through a whole lot of scenarios that I think Heat fans would have, different questions about that are kind of complicated with cap stuff. And I think he does a pretty good job of making it clear there. And the one that we're talking about here, I'm sort of on the stance that I think it would be best if, like, they want to add another max type contract to trade now. I think that's kind of what the piece made even more clear, which I knew this already, because it obviously makes sense to be able to trade for a guy, get his bird rights, as opposed to going into free agency and signing him with cap when they're going to have about 22 or so million available, because it seems like they're going to, retain none. It seems like they're going to retain some of these other options there. And so if you have 22 million, that's not going to get you somebody like Victor Oladipo or Kyle Lowry on space. So you would have to find other ways to, like if you do a sign and trade, it puts you in the hard cap. You're hard capped, and essentially from there you can't do anything. Whereas if you do a trade during the season, you can kind of still retain some flexibility, retain Duncan Robinson, and whether you want to, because there's not even a Duncan Robinson thing, right? Like whether you want to move on from him or not, however you feel about Duncan Robinson, you would still retain the asset and still have some flexibility financially while adding a high level player like a Oladipo or Kyle Lowry. And so I just think it makes a lot of sense to kind of do that trade now. And I think, we obviously need a little bit more time with the team healthy, but I think we can all kind of agree, like, this team isn't some team that has shown you that they're up there as a top 5 team yet. They just haven't played like that this season, where a team that could ignore making acquisitions like that, during the regular season.
That's a great point.
Or acting like they're above it.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. Like, they can just keep this roster intact because it's a finals team. Like, I think some of that stuff is about to, if it's not already worn off, it is about to wear off officially.
Seems like it has.
It's gone. It's gone, bro. It's gone.
So I'm not even going to ask Royal if he wants to make a trade now or if he wants to wait till the offseason, because that's a dumbass question to ask Royal, because I know he wants to make a trade right now.
Immediately.
So I'm going to actually flip it on you in a different way and ask you it this way. Alex mentioned Heat available cap space, which is clocking in. Bear with me here. Now, this is if they keep the cap holds of Nunn and Robinson. You just barked out the number, and now I'm trying to find it.
22 million, I believe. if they do keep those guys.
22 to 25 million, I think, is the range depending on the salary cap. Okay, right. So, but that's not enough for a max slot of 30 to 32 million. So I ask you this, Royal, would you rather trade for Oladipo now and have the ability to retain like a Duncan Robinson, or would you rather, but in this trade for Oladipo, you're probably going to have to give up assets in order to incentivize Houston to like make this happen. So I don't know if that's draft capital or if it's precious or whatever the case may be. It's going to be something. You're not going to just get him for expirings. Or would you rather hold off and with this $25 to $22 million sign a player like, let's say, Alonzo Ball caliber guy that you can get for $20 to $22 million? Or do you think that that's kind of not getting the Heat to the place from a top level? Like, can they compete as a contender doing something like that? I'm interested to hear your perspective.
See, you're tugging at my heartstring because I've been calling for Lonzo Ball for a couple of weeks now. But I don't believe that Lonzo Ball is the type of player that pushes us over the top. So I think I would prefer to trade for an Oladipo because he, at the very least, raises the floor on this team and possibly raises the ceiling. Lonzo Ball would be nice to have, but I still believe that if you trade it for Oladipo and ended up having to let Duncan walk, you can still make an offer to Lonzo Ball. It may not be the best offer that he get, but if he's looking for a chance to win, then we could be an attractive destination for him. I just really believe that at this point you have to. I think Clutch has brainwashed me because he keeps saying it, but we have to generate assets at this point. So, like if you're gonna make a move, even if you have to trade the kids for an Oladipo or something, you can still have an Oladipo and flip him next year if he's not working out the way that you want. But you can't just hold steady and then go into the offseason and sign guys who don't move the needle on this team at all.
I agree because they just like struck out in the offseason. Like this Harkless, Leonard, Avery Bradley thing is not working out. So I hear you there. It's just don't talk about Goran getting dealt. That's where I start getting triggered. I did on pregame recently, and shout out to Clutch. That's my homie. I got all red in the face, but I love that guy.
God, I was so mad that I wasn't on for that. When I saw it, I was so happy. It was like prime Leif back in my eyes, and I was just mad. I wasn't there to kind of instigate it some more.
The boy Leif is the culture captain. Once you come for the culture, you're going to get the horns, baby. So
I didn't know Goran would like evoke that out of me. I guess that bubble run did that to me.
I told Adam he deserved it. I told him like, no, man, get out of here.
No, personally, I hate Clutch, so I was glad to see it.
Sure,
yeah, we're all united in hating Adam. No, but like, I mean, to me, that whole talk of like trading Goran for like the number 22 pick or something like that is silly. In a year like this, where like you're supposed to be a team that's contending, and like he obviously means a lot to the Heat and to Jimmy Butler, your best player. I mean, I know he's cool with Bam too. Like it would just make. They need him. Like they need Goran Dragic. Yeah. It's not like they're just that's just somebody you can trade, right? Outside of the emotional stuff.
I do want to acknowledge Clutch's overarching point when it comes to Goran, which is that this was an emotional signing for us to give Goran Dragic $18 million. Like it was a bad business decision, and I have to agree with him.
I don't agree with that.
It was a bad business to sign because he's not worth $18 million at this point in his career.
Yeah, but I think that you're paying a little bit of equity towards future contracts. I think
and how he played in the bubble.
Yeah, but
when it mattered most.
How he played in the bubble, how it's all well and good, but we were paying him $17 million then to do it. What I'm saying is that this summer, that $18 million could have been repurposed to get us some better players.
That's why.
But it really couldn't have, though. Like, that's the thing. They were operating as an above the cap team, as a cap space team. I guess in hindsight, you could say, oh, well, they could have Christian Wood, who looks so great, or like Jeremy Grant, but that was never part of the plan to begin with. So I think it's a little Monday morning quarterback going on there. But I understand why you would do that. I get it.
I mean, Goran
but that, you know what? We're about to go off the rails. That's a podcast for another day. So I appreciate everybody tuning in with us. Ethan will be back to direct traffic in a far more cohesive manner going forward. Thank you for listening, and support our sponsors so that it can support us.